Hello everyone and welcome to Rock Report. Here we host commodity experts and company CEOs to give our audience a good foundation in their research and due diligence. Before I announce my guest, please take a few seconds of your time to read the disclaimer and of course to subscribe and like our channel. And my guest today is Per Storm, CEO of Mahvie Minerals, a Nordic exploration and mining development company with a focus on base metals and precious metals. Per, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I look forward for our discussion. I want to learn more about the company, more about the sector. Let's start. Maybe can you provide me an overview of Mahvie Minerals' mission and how it differentiates from other exploration and mining companies in the Nordic region?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Mahvie Minerals was started about 3 years ago when myself and some former colleagues in the sector thought that we want to start a new venture in exploration. And Mahvie Minerals at that time started out as a mainly base metal developer. We have and still have a project in Norway, in Mo i Rana, called Mofjell, which is a brownfield zinc and lead project, which we found out contained quite a lot of copper and gold. But in that, when we started the company, we knew that one project was a little bit too slim. So we also acquired, and through some financing operations, also acquired a gold project in Finland, Haveri, which we've been looking at sort of an option. But we started developing the Mofjell project and made a very good mineral resource assessment, almost 9 million tons of zinc equivalent. Which means that we need quite a lot of funding to drill it. And as you know, the capital markets has been slightly difficult over the past years. So we don't really see how we can fund that with our own resources at this point. So it's really open now for collaborations primarily, and if so, for an acquisition by someone. So we looked at the other project we have, which is called Haveri, which is also a brownfield project. An old abandoned gold mine stopped in 1962, which has over time been looked at from several developers. But I mean, now it is a golden opportunity, so to say, to be in gold. So we started looking at it in depth and realized that the way it has been treated earlier as a big-ish or medium-sized open pit was not doable from a permitting point of view. So we started to dig in at depth and looked at the grades and found out that there are substantial ore bodies with really high grade available. So we started modeling it, re-assayed it, and now we finished a small verification drilling program. And we just the other day got the first assay results, which were really, really, really good. Some individual cases with up to over 18 grams per ton, and for shorter parts, but also longer parts over 8 grams per ton. So the results were really encouraging, but we still have 2 more drill holes to get assay results from.
Yeah, you will expand more on the plans a little bit later. You emphasize brownfield.
Basically, we're a brownfield developer. We think that reduces the geological risk. We also know that there is, even though now there have been industrial operations in the area, which generally tend to diminish the risk when you come to social licenses to operate, because there are people who are knowledgeable about the mining industry. So we're mainly targeting brownfield areas, generally where there's been people around looking at it from time to time, but price-wise or technology-wise, it hasn't been opportune to develop them. But we think that there is a very good opportunity in the mining sector right now.
Yeah, that was my question. How do you identify and prioritize these brownfield projects, and what criteria do you use to ensure they align with your business model?
Well, two things to begin with. They need to be in areas where the industrial prerequisites are very good, meaning that there is areas where you have not existing infrastructure, because if it's a brownfield, it's been closed down, so there's no existing infrastructure in most cases, but the ability to get the industrial operations working is very important for us. So if you take Mofjell, that's probably the best place in the world to start a mine. You drive uphill into an underground mine and you have your processing plant on the docks. It is 500-700 meters adjacent to the fjord in Mo i Rana, so there's no internal logistics, and you can get your concentrate directly onto the keel, which means that there are no hassle when it comes to logistics, when it comes to that type of arrangement. Norway also being one of the few places where you can guarantee green energy, hydropower. So that's really an excellent location. You actually drive to the old mine site. You drive through an industrial area where there's 100 industrial companies, literally, 2 smelters, ferroalloy smelters, and 1 scrap-based steel mill. And there's also another iron ore mine on the other side of the fjord. So it's a very industrial area. So that really is lowering the industrial risk. And we come to Haveri. It is a gold mining area. Let's say you put a 40-50 kilometer radius, you have 3 or 4 former mines, existing mines, processing plants. So again, the industrial prerequisites are in place, because that's really a way to shorten the time from both permitting times, because you have authorities that are used to mining issues, but also getting infrastructure in place, getting contracts with infrastructure suppliers, so on and so forth. So that's really how we try to distinguish ourselves from other exploration companies and other brownfield developers.
Sure. Your Norway project, is just like you said, is focused on base metals like zinc, lead, copper, and with potential for gold. Can you share the latest updates of the mineral resource assessment and how these results shape the project's future?
Yeah, it did. But we got it roughly about a year ago, even more, 1.5 years ago. We got an 8.9 million tons at 3.8 zinc equivalent. Zinc, lead being the main participants, but actually as the copper prices are going, I would say that it's now more of a zinc copper deposit than a zinc lead deposit. We know it was closed down in the mid-80s because there was a need for a major investment in ventilation, which couldn't be carried out. It's also one of these projects that has been looked at from time to time, but the zinc prices, copper prices, the combination hasn't been fortunate. Unfortunately, what we need to do with that project right now is really a major drill campaign, 30,000 meters or something like that, which means that you need at least the equivalent amount, 3 million euros or something like that, and it has been difficult to raise that kind of funds right now. So it's really I shouldn't say care and maintenance, because it's not up and running, but it is priority 2 at this point.
Sure. Your Finland project is a gold-focused project.
That's a
What
gold
progress
project.
has been made
That's
in
a smaller
demonstrating
project.
economically viable mineralization, and how do you plan to leverage the current high gold prices?
Yeah, but that's really that we really refocused our operations towards the gold project. It's a smaller project, specifically the way we framed it. It's going underground. There's still the old mine is of course filled with water, but it has been emptied about 15 years ago. So you can do it. At that time, the gold prices were quite different. So really, what we're trying to piggyback on the gold price right now and raise the funds and develop it as quickly as we can. Ground cut off somewhere maybe 1.5-2 grams per ton. Let's see what the outlook of the mine will be. But we know there's grade available. There's a bit of a nuggety effect though. so that it has to be drilled substantially. But so far except for our holes, there's 125 drill holes already in the mineralization. So it's fairly well known.
From the geological standpoint, how do the geological characteristics of both of those projects complement each other, and how do you see opportunities to apply learnings from one project to the other?
Well, not so much actually, to be honest.
Okay.
Mainly what we took to these projects, I'm myself not a geologist, I'm a mining engineer. What we're looking at is mainly to see that we have learnings from working in that kind of environments, the industrial environments that we are active in at this point. And the geologies are quite different, as you understand. The Finnish project is in the Tampere schist belt, whereas the Mofield project is a conventional VHMS setting.
Sure. In the terms of permitting, exploration permitting, and development permitting, what what permits do you have in hand, and what permits will you secure going forward if the financing goes
We
in the
have
right way?
exploration permits in both places. What we're starting in Finland now is the work towards a mining concession or a mining permit. Of course, we need environmental permits in both of these places. In Norway, you also need a zoning plan, but this is already an industrial area, so we don't see the zoning plan as a major problem there. In Finland, they have a slightly different permitting situation. You don't need an industrial zoning plan in that sense, but we also need. We're working very closely with the authorities, and we have a very good relationship with the municipality in the area.
Sure. Sustainability is described as a core component of your company's strategy. Can you elaborate on specific technologies or practices,
Yeah.
such as closed water systems or battery powered equipment, that you are implementing to meet Nordic environmental standards?
Absolutely, and I think that's really key. And I think it's a core of our operations, but I think you will find that in most exploration companies today, because there's nobody who cannot work with another. But definitely, I mean, we're really looking at the latest when it comes to battery operated equipment. Of course, it is available. Epiroc, Sandvik, they already have these kind of equipment. You need to queue up because the demand has been. But we're also looking at, when we come to the processing side, we are following the development of the processing very closely, and there are zero emission processing facilities available. There is also development going on that dramatically reduce the energy consumption in processing and even in comminution. So there's very interesting projects going on that we're following very closely, even though we're not actively participating in that kind of development. But I've got a background in that kind of development, so I'm really keen to see what comes out of it.
Sure.
Particularly, there's a very interesting comminution project going on where you can reduce up to 80% of the energy demand, which would dramatically facilitate these things. Secondly, of course, there's logistics. I mean, one of the key needs to reduce carbon emissions is in logistics. So that's also a reason why we're working in already industrial areas to a large extent.
Yeah.
To take an example of what you mentioned about closed water, when we did the drilling program, we had a completely closed water circuit. It was inspected by external inspectors. Also, noise reducing operations. So yeah, we're really taking this to heart. We're doing it the proper way and minimizing. We're minimizing the environment impact. I mean, there's no way you do get a hole in the ground. That's unavoidable. But we need to make sure that we are minimizing the impact. We are also now starting up looking at a way of backfilling, so we reduce the need for waste dams of different types.
Sure. The EU inclusion of copper and nickel as a critical raw materials highlights their strategic importance. How does your company position itself to capitalize on this trend? You mentioned gold, and you will capitalize the trend on gold, but how will you capitalize the trend on these other metals?
Yeah, there are some specifically in Mofield we do have copper. We haven't That's really the next step. That's really investigating if there's more. There's a tendency to see that there's more copper available towards the end of the known mineralization at this point. So we would really like to drill that further. So that's really the next step, and that would put us into the copper sphere proper. But in Mofield, there are also other types of critical minerals, bismuth, antimony, and germanium available. But that needs to be investigated through processing tests. Because when this mine was in operation in the 70s and 80s, those substances were not critical in any way, and they weren't really, they were just a nuisance. So they were really seen as impurities in the processing stage, whereas today they are seen as a valuable component. So there's been a shift there, but we need to make sure that they can be separated in the processing steps. When we come to when we come to the finished price, there is some copper available. The question is really if the copper volumes are big enough so it's worth separating them. But myself, I am claiming that gold is also a strategic metal, even though it hasn't been realized by the European Union yet. If you go to the Chinese equivalent, they include both gold and iron ore because they know how to build a society. We've lost that idea in Europe. We've built too much already. But gold, I think, is specific because that's not an industrially strategic metal, but it's a financially strategic asset. So I'm claiming that's strategic as well, beside the point that the prices are high.
Good point. I would like to hear your take on the company valuation. Of course, every CEO will say my company is undervalued. However, let's take a realistic approach. You know the projects you have, you know the valuation of those. And what steps are you taking to communicate the company's value to investors and improve the market perception?
Yeah, I think there are two things that the potential is quite substantial. We know if we focus on the gold project, which we're working on right now, there is some substantial upside. The values, even though they're in situ, are way above what the company values are. Well, what we've seen, I think, is a low valuation due to the risk, not the geological risk, but the company risks. Will we survive? Will we recapitalize? Now we have a share issue going. We still have a quite decent share price above the strike price for the share issue. So I think that's really what we're focusing on now, highlighting the potential of what we can achieve. And given when we get the funds from the share issue, we can really place this as a real potential, fairly low risk project. So that's really where we are right now, trying to capture as much of the potential as we can through refinancing and doing the right things.
Sure. How much capital do you need for stabilizing the company?
Stabilizing the company. What we're looking at right now is 1.5 million euros.
Euros.
That will take us 1.5 first, and then there's an option program for 1.2. So let's say that will take us the next 12 to 18 months with a fair share of operations.
Yeah.
But from this point where we are today, I would say that we need something between 200 and 250 million, 20 to 25 million euros to get us into an operating mine. So it's more than we have at this point, but it's not a huge amount of money.
Sure.
Given that with the gold prices today, you can easily see the potential in this.
Yeah, yeah. And do you see difficulties in raising money? How are you generally seeing the financial markets today, and the possibility of junior company, or company on lower scale of advancement raising money?
Yeah, I think that's really one of the catch-22s in this business. We're underfunded, which means most companies are underfunded, which means that you cannot develop them as quickly as you can, which means that a lot of investors think, oh, it takes so long time. But the thing is that could we reverse that trend? When I started in the exploration business, then we had ample finance, and too many bad projects got financed, which means that the there were a lot of bad projects coming for early on in this cycle, 20 years ago, something like that. So we had a few quite spectacular bankruptcies and things like that, particularly in the Nordic countries, which made financing of sound projects quite difficult. And the projects that are left today, 15 years later, they are really high potential projects. You will get them up and running. You already have the iron ore up in Kaunas, northern Sweden. Iron ore is difficult because the margins are tough, but you will get a couple of iron ore mines up and running more, both in mid Sweden, most likely. You will get the Nussir project up in Norway, copper project that's been recently been acquired by Blue Moon. Used to be Nussir. So I think you're going to see that. And when you had a gold mine in Botany Exploration that recently came on stream, I think it's picking up, but there's been a lot of hesitancy to sorry,
Bless you.
thank you, to invest in these kind of companies. So generally, most of the companies have been underfunded for quite some time, but we make do, and we do see that projects of limited scale have reasonable possibilities to get funding. It would be easier probably if we were in Toronto or Sydney or even London, but those exchanges are quite expensive, and small regional companies cannot really afford it.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you that question. Have you considered applying on the listing in Canada or US? However, I will ask you a different question. Have you considered strategic partners, joint ventures, or even selling one project to finance the other?
We've considered everything at this point. So yes, definitely. Both strategic collaborations, we are looking at possibly collaborations primarily, as I said, but we can also divest the Morfield project because that's slightly on the biggish side for us. But definitely, we also looked at listing on AIM primarily in London because that's at least European. But there's a different legal system compared to European legal systems. You have it's quite expensive to be listed on AIM, and at this point where there's been limited funds available, it's not been an option. If we can now get the values that we think are there, then it's definitely an option down the road.
Sure, sure. Who are the people behind the company? Okay, we've met you. Who is there on your management and technical side?
Yeah. Uh, Basically, in my board, I've got a very competent board. I've got a CEO of another exploration company on the board, and we are mainly the technical part of it. Of course, we work a lot with consultants, both legal, financial, and technical consultants. So I've been in the business for quite a while, so I know most of the people worth knowing in the area. And then we also have we actually have a lawyer on the board, which is very good because we get all the legal input that we don't need an external lawyer for using. And we have an external chairman, also an entrepreneur in a different business, which is good because you get the kind of feedback. Generally, he's a very seasoned manager, So that works very well. We've got good top shareholders. I myself are one of them since I was part of starting the company, and there are other in the same network. We recently actually got a new main shareholders that I didn't personally know earlier, but very good, and he's been very supportive of what we're doing so far. So it's, I think we've got a fair lineup.
Sure. How is your share structure looking today? So how much of the percentage of the retail, the percentage of the big boys, the insiders? Can you tell me more?
I mean,
Approximate.
let's say that we have about 8,000 shareholders at this point. Less than 50 or owns 25% of the company, I would say. The rest is pure retail.
Okay. Final question, Per. News flow from the company. What can investors expect in the upcoming period?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. What we recently, just 2 days ago, we announced the assay results from the first drill hole, because there's been a lot of interest from the retail side. So we decided to. So we're going to release all the assay results as we get them. So there's two outstanding drill holes still, and then we're going to package this so we can say something about the entirety of the drill program. So that's one thing, and then we're starting, of course, on an updated mineral resource assessment, which we're very much looking forward to. We have the basis already, but we need to get the verification by the assays from the drill hole. So that's really cool. And when we have that, then there's of course processing tests that needs to be made. We know it's processable because there's been mining and operations already, but we need to make it with up-to-date processing equipment. See what kind of yields we can get today compared to what they had earlier. So really where we get the technical cutoff for the mining operations. So that's one thing. And then, of course, we're going into a pre-feasibility phase. So this is somewhere between a PEA and a PFS. What we're going into now is a PFS proper, starting, as I said, mineral resource processing test, mine layout. And then, of course, in parallel, because this will be one of the major issues, is the environmental part. And we're starting probably with the water issues, because this is on a peninsula. So the water issues will be very pertinent.
Sure. Per, I wish you luck with your projects going forward, and I want to thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I think it's going to be a very interesting summer, and it's going to be an even more interesting autumn when we head into 2026.